You know how on social media, sometimes you have trending topics, trending headlines? The generous was a trending headline that described Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, because so many people experienced it, so many people witnessed it. They saw it with their own two eyes. So, another incident involving Marwan ibn al-Hakam, la'natullahi alayh, they say, and I'll summarize this, they say that Imam al-Hassan had a mule. Marwan was a very, very rich man. You could describe him as being filthy rich. In today's monetary value, he would have been worth tens, perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars. So he was very rich. And yet, despite his wealth, he had his eye on the mule of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, which tells you that this mule was valuable, it was special. You know how today you've got different car brands, and even within the same brand, you have cars that are better and more expensive and more luxurious than others, right? You have the C-Class in the Mercedes-Benz group, and then you have the Maybach. This mule was considered a very beautiful, very useful, very it was a very expensive kind of animal to have. So Marwan had his eye on it. So what he does is he orchestrates this scenario where one of his friends is tasked with taking the mule from Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. And without getting into the details, Marwan said to him that if you do me this one favor, I will do 30 favors for you. 30. So this man goes and he asks Imam al-Hassan in a particular way to give him the mule. The Imam immediately got off the mule. He gave it to that man. Then he said to him, if Marwan himself had asked me, I would have given it to him too. In other words, I know he wanted it. And if he'd asked me, even though Marwan is Marwan, I would have given him the mule. He treats his enemies like this, so that maybe they turn around and they change their ways and they embrace the path of righteousness as opposed to the vile nature that they possessed. This is Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. Now I want to mention something that I think as believers and as followers of Imam al-Hassan, as lovers at the very least of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, we can learn from. There's a beautiful narration by the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, in which the Holy Prophet says, ألا أنبئكم بخير الخلائق في الدنيا والآخرة. Do you wish for me to tell you about the most noble virtues in this world as well as the next? Imagine. What is the most noble virtue? Rasulullah explains. He says, أن تصل من قطعك وتعطي من حرمك وتعفو عمن ظلمك. If we are followers of Imam al-Hassan, or if we aim to follow in his footsteps, this is one thing we could learn from him. Too often we find people within the fraternity of believers, within the community of those who associate themselves with Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, where tiny disagreements devolve into major schisms and fights erupt and hatred festers in the heart of believers against one another. And one of the excuses that we commonly hear is that he treats me like this, I'm going to reciprocate. He said this about me, I will say that about him. He mistreated me and I'll mistreat him. Whereas Rasulullah teaches us in this hadith, and Imam al-Hassan illustrates this in his conduct. And تصل من قطعك. If someone is kind to you, it's nothing to brag about when you reciprocate the kindness. What's so special about that? If someone invites you, he's already done you a favor. He's taken the prerogative. For you to go and invite him is simply returning the favor. The Holy Prophet says, when someone severs relations with you, that is when you're supposed to establish relations with them. When someone refuses to say salam to you, that's when you go out of your way to say salam to them. When a family member decides to cut you off, that is when you reestablish and rekindle the relationship with that person. And when someone deprives you, that is when you give them and offer them from your money, your possessions, the things that you have. Again, this is something that Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam led by example in the most noble, most pristine, most exquisite, and most beautiful of manners. Now imagine, if Imam al-Hassan treated his enemies like that, how would he treat his friends? In one report, it says that a person came to Imam al-Hassan and he recited poetry praising the Imam. Not praising him as an individual, but praising his position, praising the status of Imam, praising the fact that he came from the family of Rasulullah. So he came to the Imam, he said to him, I have a few verses of poetry that I'd like to read, and it's about you. The Imam said, stop. He asked the servant, he said, how much money do we have left? He said, we have 3 pouches, 3 bags of money, of gold or silver. The Imam said, bring them all. He took them, he gave it to the man. The man said, I haven't even read my poetry. The Imam said, no. Once you read your poetry, I won't have enough money to offer you. By the mere virtue of you expressing your desire to come to us and to speak those verses, to recite those verses of poetry about the grandson of Rasulullah, I'm giving you all I have. Once you start reciting, I won't be able to compensate you sufficiently. This is Imam al-Hassan. One report, again, which I found in Sunni sources, says that one day Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam saw this slave. And the slave had a loaf of bread. So the Imam began observing him. By the way, this report, there's a similar one that's attributed to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. But again, there are some minor differences which tell you that this happened on more than one occasion. عادتكم الإحسان سجيتكم الكرم. This is the household of generosity. This is the household that exhibited the most noble virtues of the divine. And so it is absolutely not surprising that they would do this over and over and over again. So the Imam saw this slave. He took that loaf of bread, and there was a dog sitting in front of him. He took the loaf of bread, he broke it in half, he gave one half to the dog, and he ate the other half. Imam al-Hassan went to him. He said to him, what is this I just saw you do? Why would you give half of your food? And these were slaves, right? They didn't have, food whenever they desired. All he had was this loaf. He said, why did you do this? He said, Yabna Rasulullah, as I was about to start eating, I saw my eyes met the eyes of the dog. And I thought to myself, I'm a creation of God, and so is this dog. I'm hungry, so is this dog. So I felt ashamed of eating and not offering half of my portion, half of my food to this dog.